Welcome, Celeste Warren. How are you?
I am very, very well. How are you?
Doing well. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Not too far. I'm in New York. So we're excited to have you. Are you ready to pour into our listeners?
I am absolutely ready.
And I feel that energy. All right. So, Celeste, would you share your journey to leadership and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, my journey started probably when I was a child, and my father was the first Black teacher and principal and superintendent in that area of Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio. And so I learned from him, watching him as the first, and that's where diversity, equity, inclusion was sort of ingrained in me. And making sure that I was, being inclusive, that I knew who I was talking to, trying to reach them, et cetera. And so that sort of stayed with me throughout my career. I was a reporter first out of undergraduate, and I got tired of eating ramen noodles and macaroni and cheese and asking my parents for rent money. You just don't make a lot of money
Mhm.
if you're not in, the major markets. So I went through kind of a pre mid career crisis and talked to my older sister, and she said, well, why don't you just go back and get your master's? And I said, you know what? That's probably going to be the only way I'm going to be able to sort of think about how I do something different. And
Mhm.
so went to grad school, ended up pursuing human resources, and started working with General Foods in White Plains, New York. Was there, and then I moved to Hoboken, and then moved down to Jacksonville, Florida with them. And Merck came calling after that. A headhunter said, "Hey, we're expanding the US market human resources team. Do you think you might be interested in interviewing?" And I didn't know anything about the pharmaceutical industry. So I asked my younger sister, who at the time was working for Pfizer, one of the competitors, and I said, "Tell me about Merck." And she said, "You need to go and interview. It's the creme de la creme of pharmaceutical companies. It's a great company. Go interview." So I went and interviewed and got hired, and the rest, as they say, is history. I was a generalist for years and then stepped into the chief diversity inclusion officer role 10 years ago and retired from there. And now I am rewired and I am doing consulting. I started my own consulting firm where I'm talking to leaders, professionals in the DE&I field, but also I talk to universities, I talk to nonprofits, I talk to a variety of different people to help them to maneuver and continue to do the work that they know is important for either their customers or their employees or their constituents, depending on what they do, but helping them to maneuver in this times that we are in and still continue to drive and do the good work that all of them are doing.
And it is super important work. And of course, I have to ask at a time where our federal government is not only not supportive of a program like diversity, equity, and inclusion, which doesn't make sense to many, many people. Not only are they not supportive, they're hostile against it. So, how do you face that? Like, how do you address that? Because it's important work. There are listeners that are leaning in right now and wanting to include this in their programs and in their organizations and trying to figure this out. So, what are some tips that you can give us?
Sure. So I like to say that you have to think about your work in diversity, equity, inclusion, not on the outside looking in, but from the inside out. And what I mean by that is you have to think about it from the standpoint of how are you going to make sure that it's meeting the needs of your organization. And the way to do that is an inside out approach. So when you're thinking about, for example, business strategies, you know that you have customers that you're trying to meet their needs. Well, customers are very, very diverse. They have different ideals, backgrounds, different life experiences, different perspectives, different identities. And so, in order for you to put together any of your marketing strategies or your sales strategies or your development strategies of products and services, You have to understand what it is that are the needs of your customers across the different segmentations of customers that you have. And so, in order to do that, you can't just interpret what you think they might need, but
Right.
you have to make sure that you have people that are sitting around the table that understand those communities and can help you to create business strategies that will meet the needs of your diverse customers. So that's an inside out approach. You need to be able to understand it from that perspective. The second thing is it's just leadership 101, management 101. Because as a leader, as a manager, you need to be able to understand what the needs are of the individuals that are on your team. And they're all different. They're from different backgrounds, lifestyles, they have different skills and capabilities, they have different perspectives. So, as a manager, if you want the team to be effective, as a leader, if you want your organization to be effective, you have to understand what are the needs of those different individual employees and then be able to meet them where they are and pull them forward because you're trying to get them to a collective purpose. And the collective purpose, the mission, the vision of that respective organization. And all of those people who are so different across all of those myriads and dimensions of diversity, how do you get them all and leverage their strengths and develop them in areas of development and get them to a place where they are aligned with your collective purpose? That's what diversity, equity, inclusion is all about. Good business, good management, good leadership. And that's what I try to get people to understand it from that perspective. It's not about preferential treatment. It's not about you're getting something and I'm not getting it. That's not what it's about. As soon as people stop listening to the misinformation, the disinformation, and start really understanding the essence of it, that's what it is. And that's why I wrote the book that I wrote, The Truth About Equity, because I was just getting so tired of people not understanding it and then weaponizing it.
The truth about equity, where can we find this book? Where can we get information on it?
You can get it on Amazon, and it's also available on my website, crwdiversity.com. And you can get information about what I do, and then also there's a link right there directly to the book on Amazon. It's also going to be in bookstores as well, Barnes and Noble, etc.
Now, I love that you mentioned it's leadership 101. As a leader, it is about emotional intelligence. It is about adding value to people. It's about serving your community, the people you get to lead. So I love how you frame that. And also, you mentioned this hostility and the fear that underlines the message that we hear a lot. Tell us a little bit more about how we can face that fear.
This environment is given license to be able to speak around that. And people have different perspectives, they have different ideals, and that's fine, right? What has become problematic from my viewpoint is the fact that one person has one ideal, the other person has one idea and perspective, and they can't have an intelligent, respectful conversation in some instances. Most people can, but the polarization that's happened from a political standpoint and ideology has become so divisive in recent years that it's just, we can't have that conversation. And so, what I do in a lot of cases, I try to have a conversation where I say, okay, what do you think about it? And I ask questions so I can understand kind of where they're coming from and understand like the foundation of their belief system. And then engage in a conversation with, well, here's kind of what I think and here what I believe about it, and see if there's a common ground. If you're in corporations or in organizations, you want to be a better leader, you want to be a better manager. So there's that common ground there. There's also the ground of if you're an individual contributor, individual leader, and not someone who manages people in a workplace, you want a culture where you feel valued and empowered to be able to do what it is that you come in to do every day. And so you can't argue with the premise of what we're trying to do in creating workplaces that are inclusive and have a culture that empowers people and makes people better managers and leaders. And I try to find that equal ground where we can agree on something. And then, you know what? If the gap is too large, then you have to protect your own peace and walk away from it. You can have the conversation and dialogue. You can also respectfully agree to disagree and walk away from it because you have to protect your peace. You have to protect your mental health as well. In change management, in that methodology, there's going to be a certain percentage that just are not going to come along. They don't believe in what you believe in. They don't want to be engaged in it. They're set in their ways, whatever reason. It is what it is. So you focus on the other percentage of people who I like to say they're the movable middle, that you can have those conversations and that dialogue. And some may say, you know what, I think there is a common ground here. So that's what I would do. I would start with, first of all, engaging in the dialogue, asking the questions, trying to find common ground and getting agreement on certain principles, and then moving forward from that standpoint. And if you can't find common ground, then just agreeing to disagree and walk away.
And it does take a lot of maturity. It also takes intentionality, right, Celeste?
Mhm.
We can be triggered. People can press our buttons, and it takes practice to really step back as a leader and say, you know what, I may not value what you value, but I value that you get the choice. It's that sovereign gift of choice that we all have. And when you can't come together, but walking away, respectfully is honoring that. We need to keep practicing it because it's a growth area, right? Especially now. I find myself asking, do I want to light a candle or curse the darkness? And I think I have to practice that daily because it's such an emotional space, but it is also a very powerful space. And I love how you approach it. I love how you were raised this way to honor all kinds of people. And that is such a beautiful place to be. And so now it's our responsibility, your responsibility as true leaders to light other people's candles. And I appreciate what you're bringing to the table. So thank you. So, as leaders, we face significant changes, crises all the time. What has been your best crisis and why?
I will tell you, when I was at my previous company and I was asked to take on the role of the Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer, I didn't want to do it. It was something that I was very passionate about from a child coming up all the way through. I lived my life, every job, every responsibility that I had was done through a lens of diversity and inclusion. And in the different roles that I had, I headed up HR for various different divisions and parts of the organization. And I was fine. I was happy because in my corner of the world, things were going okay. I was able to implement different strategies, integrate DE&I into the business practices and the people practices and policies and everything. Great. So when I was asked to take the global role, my apprehension was people aren't as passionate about it as I am. They don't see it and view it in the way that I do. How can I convince all of these leaders? I don't want to have to be fighting with people all the time. And so I had a conversation with our then CEO at the time, Ken Frazier. And we had a conversation, and it was funny because my boss at the time, the CHRO, she had one of her regular monthly meetings talking about what was going on. And she said, look, I know how you feel about this role, but we really want you to take the role because we don't feel like we're in a good place. And it's something that we know you are the right person to do it. And I remember thinking, well, who's we? And well, Ken and I feel that you're the right person for the role. And Ken wants to talk to you about it. And I thought to myself, oh, this is my out because Ken's a busy man. He won't be able to see me for probably weeks. And so in that time, I can sort of weave my way out of it. And I said, sure. I said, I'll talk with Ken, no problem at all. So she grabs my hand at that moment and walks me over to his office.
She knew what she was doing.
Yes, she did. Ken and I had the conversation, and I asked him some very pointed questions during our time. And needless to say, he convinced me to take the role. And I knew that I had his support, I had his air coverage, I had the air coverage of the CHRO, and I had skills and capabilities, not just a passion. So you can't just have a passion for something. You have to have skills and capabilities. You have to have business acumen. You have to have all of those things to be able to create the strategy and then get from where you are to a desired future state. And so my apprehension and the biggest leadership turmoil I think I had was taking that role 10 years ago. And I had a lot of white knuckle moments where I was engaged in conversations with people who just weren't really enthralled with it. They weren't excited about it. They weren't engaged with it. Some couldn't even spell diversity and inclusion. But we were able to take the organization from where it was to an organization that truly embraced it and understood the importance to effective leadership, effective management, making sure that everyone, regardless of your identity, everyone was included in the strategy. No one was left behind. And also integrating it into our business strategies as well. Because when you think about your customers and patients and all of these different things, needing to meet the needs of it to fulfill the mission of the organization. It was a long journey. It was a good journey. There were good days, good hours, bad hours within a day. I was very proud of the work that we had done.
Great leveling up. I'm curious, what was it during that conversation with your boss? Because you were intent. Yeah, 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 I'm not doing this. What was it that shifted you?
It was the conversation with Ken. You know, he was getting to a point where he was a couple, maybe 2, 3 years from retiring as the CEO. He knew it. And he talked about his legacy and what type of an organization that he wanted in place as he left and moved on. He talked about what I had to offer to be able to do that and what he wanted. And he just saw my passion, but also the skills and the capabilities that I had demonstrated through the years. He knew that I was the right person to take this on.
Yeah.
He knew that I had the fire in my belly. He actually even said those words. And then as he was talking to me, he didn't know my father, but I think he was channeling him. And he said, "What questions do you have of me?" And I said, the main question is, are you serious about this? Because if you're not serious about the direction that we want to go, about being able to empower people and having an inclusive environment. And he said, "Well, what if I told you I wasn't?" And by this time, he had got me all like 90% there. And it was kind of the Jedi mind trick. It was like, well, let me tell you, if you're not, so what? Because you know what? Now I'm going to take this job and we're going to go and we're going to do what we need to do. And you're going to come along with me. It was so funny, but it was a way for him to sort of say, you tell me, even if I wasn't, what would you do? And the way that I answered the question for him was like, and that's why you're the right person to take this at this time that we're in right now. That was it. It was this give and take, this dance that we were doing, and him basically sort of flipping the switch on me and making me this warrior. I've always been a warrior, but really just sort of putting a fire under it.
Isn't it beautiful how some people were put in our lives to ignite us?
Yes.
I mean, I think he spoke the right words. He talked about legacy, and I love how he responded to, "Are you serious about this?" And what kept coming to my mind as I look at you and I think of if I were in that situation trying to convince you to step into this beautiful role that you were created to do, I would ask, if not you, who?
Mm.
That stops me in my tracks as a leader. Sometimes we face that wall, and it's not just so much fear, but it's also being uncomfortable. It's also, getting out of your comfort zone. I've worked so hard to get here. Now I have to move. But it's a beautiful thing to have people in our lives that ask us those intense questions, those beautiful questions, and help move us forward. And so now you're also doing that for other people, which is really important work. So thank you for that. Now, Celeste, as someone committed to continuous learning, What are you learning right now?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. I am learning that I need to be able to make sure now more than ever that I'm attuned to what's happening externally, not just in the United States, but across different regions of the world as well. And then also consistently trying to learn about cultures, the impact that the external environment is having on different identities of people. And, when I was in the role, people would say, Celeste, well, you're the expert on different cultures. And I would say, no, I'm not the expert. I said, do you realize how many different cultures and subcultures that there are around the world, around the globe? It's impossible for me to know about every single culture. But what I can do is when I encounter someone, I can ask questions to learn because you have to consistently be in a learning mode in these types of roles because you're constantly learning about people, about different identities, about different perspectives. So you have to be in a place that you are in a spirit of learning all the time. And so now it's just even more important for me. And the thing that I like about being an entrepreneur now is I plan my day. It's not planned for me. It's me planning and doing what I need to be doing and working on the projects, initiatives, talking to the people, et cetera, that I need to. But I break out time during the day to read articles, to read the news feed, and to find out what's really going on externally around the globe, and then think about how that impacts diversity, equity, and inclusion, and be able to talk to individuals about it. Sometimes I got to turn the news feed off. I got
Right.
to stop reading it because it gets a little bit overwhelming and honestly sad sometimes. But then, I take that whatever time that I need and I go back, I go after it. Because one thing is that it's ingrained in me and I am a warrior. I am going to sit there and fight for what I believe is right, not just for me and my family, but for thousands of people who haven't found it within themselves yet, that courage of their conviction or that courage to be able to elevate their voices. So we have a responsibility.
I love how you personify the spirit of DEI. You're a learner, you're an observer, you're curious, you love people, all kinds of people. There is so much to learn, and it's the spirit of true leadership. You can't get away from that. Very powerful. So, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, Celeste, when you reflect on leadership today, what are your biggest concerns and what gives you the most hope?
One of the concerns that I have is around the leaders who were active allies, who were great leaders. They demonstrated inclusive leadership skills. They were doing an excellent job in meeting their employees where they were and bringing them up to a level of understanding, from a skills and capabilities, from ideas, perspectives, different things like that. They were doing such a wonderful job. And now in this environment, they're fearful of, am I doing the right thing? Am I saying the right thing? Am I going to get in trouble? What can I say? What can't I say? How do I have to behave now? Do I have to roll things back, my behavior? What do I need to do? And I don't want them to feel stifled. I want them to continue to be the effective leaders that they have been and continue to do that work. Because as I said, it's effective leadership. They're creating a culture within their teams, within their organizations, a culture of engagement, of empowerment, and inclusion. And their employees feel valued for what they bring to the table, their skills, their capabilities, also their cultural experiences as well that contribute to bridging that gap between the organization and their customers. That's what my biggest fear is, that they feel stifled and don't demonstrate that type of leadership that is so needed, especially in today's workforce.
Many people can feel that way. And in this climate, it's a valid fear. How can we approach that? Like, are there some tools in your website where, I can download and get some more information on how to approach those obstacles?
My website is more of a let's engage in a conversation. I talk about some of the things that I can do, and I have different examples and also links to my YouTube channel where you can hear firsthand conversations and dialogue around different tools and different resources and things that you can do. But I would say the first thing is you need to educate yourself. You need to make sure that you have an intellectual curiosity and awareness of how I can be a better leader in the environment, in my organization, how I can demonstrate inclusive leadership skills, where I can go to build those muscles, if you will. And then the second thing is, how can I bring my employees along? You talked about what I call servant leadership, so critically important in today's world. How can I be a better servant leader to the people on my team? From a cultural standpoint, what do I need to put in place to be able to leverage all of the differences in the people in my team to that collective purpose that I talked about earlier? And then the third thing is, how do I integrate it into my business strategies? Because, talk about feeling valued in an organization. If an employee, let's say they're on a marketing team and they're sitting there and they're talking about a marketing strategy or a sales strategy that they need to put together. And they also bring not just their marketing skills, the sales skills, but they also are bringing their cultural awareness and being able to say, you know what? As a Black female, I don't know if that strategy is going to work. We have to take it a little bit further to reach these customers because in the environment that they're in, whether that be a rural environment or an urban environment, there are different obstacles and barriers that get in the way from them being able to really be able to use the services, the products that we have because of X, Y, and Z. You know that because you're from that culture, you understand that identity, you understand those people, and you're able to say, here's kind of what I know. And so being able to bring your functional skills and capabilities plus your cultural awareness to the table, that really makes someone feel valued and being able to bring their true authentic selves to the table. That's what I try to instill in the work that I'm doing with people.
Very important work. Now, what gives you the most hope?
What gives me the most hope is something that my grandmother used to say, this too shall pass, because I know that the pendulum always is swinging. If you look through the annals of history, whenever there has been an increase in social activism, going back decades, right after that, there's always a pendulum swing where there is more of a conservative ideology. And so that conservatism happens usually after there has been an increase in some type of social activism. It happened, with the Civil Rights Act during that time. It happened with women's suffrage. It happened, during the Vietnam War and all the protests that were happening there. It happens throughout history, not just in the United States, but across different countries. And so my hope is that we understand history, we study history, we don't let history repeat itself, and we do the things that we need to do and stay true to ourselves, our values, our convictions, and keep on pressing on. I know that there are lots of leaders and people who believe that and who stay true to the courage of their convictions, who want to see an inclusive society, who want to see everyone being able to achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve throughout education, throughout the workplace, and just in the general society. I believe that wholeheartedly. And I have hope that that's going to continue to happen because this too shall pass. We will be able to right size the ship, if you will. What I'd like to see is that the pendulum's in the middle,
Mhm.
not just this constant swinging back and forth with extremist views, but we come to a place where we're all able to have conversations, dialogues, have common ground. And if we can't find common ground in certain issues, then we agree to disagree. and we walk away treating each other with dignity and respect. The world will go on. That's the hope that I have.
And it is a beautiful hope. Having conversations like this, expanding our minds, our hearts, understanding that, there's a universal law of one. We're all one. And we have to remember that. Quite often we forget that. And like you said, to live in a space where you hold those values, understanding that those values are beneficial, not just to you, but those around you, because that's key. Right? You can have a value that you want to hold on to, but it may not be beneficial to everybody. But understanding that as a leader, I need to lead myself well first before I even step out and even think about leading someone else, because that is such an honor. So I love what you're bringing to the table. I love your perspective on that. To me, you're a highly curious person, loves to learn, listens well, and that requires leaning in, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
The deep work that you're doing brings hope. So thank you so much. Now, we have a surprise question from a former guest. Are you ready to tackle it?
I am.
So, John Maxwell talks a lot about teamwork makes the dream work.
Yes.
So, Matt Lay wants to know, if teamwork makes the dream work, then what makes the team work?
Very simply, inclusion makes the team work. If everyone feels engaged, valued, and empowered to bring what it is that they can bring to the table, which is that creativity, that innovation, the ideas, the perspectives, if they can bring all of that to the table and you can leverage all of that, that's what makes the team work.
Perfect. I mean, I can't think of a better answer than that. All right. So, Celeste, as a listener of this podcast, what's a question that you'd like a future leadership guest to respond to? Like, what are you curious about?
I would like a future guest on your podcast to answer the question, what are you afraid of when it comes to demonstrating inclusive leadership? What fears do you have?
That's a powerful question. Thank you so much for that. Now, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Order a copy of the book, The Truth About Equity, what it really is, what it isn't. Make sure you get a copy of it. Engage in conversations and dialogue with people so you can understand different perspectives, but also that you can share the essence of what diversity, equity, inclusion is all about. So you can be a sane voice in a wilderness of misinformation and disinformation.
A very important resource, The Truth About Equity. Where can we get it?
You can get it on crwdiversity.com, or you can order it from Amazon.
Celeste, thank you so much for adding value to me and to our listeners. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed every minute of it.